we have discussed 10 theoretical frameworks. Now let's move on to the next. Now we have semiotics. Semiotics emerged during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, especially in the 1890s and 1910s. The central idea of semiotics is quite simple. Literature creates meaning through signs and symbols. Words, images, and objects in a text often represent something beyond their literal meaning. One of the key thinkers was Ferdinand de Saussure. He explained that language is a system of signs, and meaning comes from the relationships between those signs. Another important scholar was Charles Sanders Peirce, who developed a detailed theory of signs and how they communicate meaning. Later, Donald Barthes showed how signs and symbols work not only in literature but also in everyday culture, advertisements, and media. Umberto Eco further explored how readers interpret signs and create meanings from texts. So, in short, semiotics studies how signs and symbols work in literature and how they help readers understand and create meaning. Next, we come to psychoanalytic theory, a major literary approach that emerged in the early 20th century, around 1900s. Psychoanalytic theory is based on the idea that human behavior is often influenced by unconscious desires, fears, memories, and conflicts that lie beneath our conscious awareness. Literary critics using this approach believe that these hidden psychological forces can be revealed through literary texts. So instead of focusing only on plot or style, psychoanalytic critics explore the inner minds of characters, authors, and even readers. They ask questions such as what hidden desires motivate a character? What fears or anxieties are being expressed? What unconscious meanings might be present in the text? The foundation of this theory was laid by Sigmund Freud, who introduced concepts such as the unconscious mind, repression, and dreams. Carl Jung expanded these ideas through his theory of the collective unconsciousness and archetypes. Jacques Lacan reinterpreted Freud's ideas through language and linguistics, while Julia Kristeva explored the connections between psychology, language, and identity. So, psychoanalytic theory views literature as a window into the hidden workings of the human mind, revealing unconscious desires, fears, and psychological conflicts that shape human behavior. Now, let's discuss phenomenology, a literary and philosophical approach that developed from the early 1900s to the 1960s. The central idea of phenomenology is that meaning comes from human consciousness and personal experiences. Rather than focusing only on the external world, phenomenologists ask how things appear to us and how we experience them in our minds. So, when applied to literature, this means that a text does not have meaning entirely on its own. Meaning emerges through the interaction between the text and the reader's consciousness. So, in other words, reading is an active experience in which readers help create meaning through their perceptions and interpretations. The founder of phenomenology was Edmund Husserl, who argued that we should study phenomena as they are experienced in consciousness. Maurice Merleau-Ponty expanded this idea by emphasizing the importance of perception and the human body in shaping experience. Roman Ingarden applied phenomenological concepts directly to literature, arguing that a literary work is completed through the reader's engagement with it. George Paulet focused on the reader's experience of entering the consciousness presented in a text. So, in short, phenomenology argues that literary meaning arises from human consciousness and lived experiences. Now, we have Russian formalism, a literary movement that emerged in Russia during the 1910s. Russian formalists believed that literature should be studied as literature, not as history, politics, biography, or psychology. Their main focus was on the text itself, especially its language, structure, style, and literary techniques. According to this approach, what makes a text literary is not just its subject matter, but the way it is written. Formalists argued that literature transforms ordinary language into something artistic and distinctive through various literary devices. One of the most important thinkers was Viktor Slavoski, who introduced the concept of defamiliarization. He argued that literature makes familiar things seem strange and fresh, allowing readers to see the world differently. Roman Jakobson focused on the special functions of language and literature. Boris Eichenbaum helped develop formalist methods of literary analysis, while Yuri Tynyanov studied how literary forms and genres evolve over time. So, Russian formalism argues that literature should be analyzed through its language, form, structure, and literary devices rather than through external factors such as the author's life or social background. Now, let's move on to Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. This theory emerged in Germany during the 1920s and 1930s. It developed as scholars tried to understand how society, culture, and power influence people's lives. The main idea of this critical theory is that literature and culture should not simply entertain us. Instead, they should help us recognize and challenge social injustice, domination, and oppression. Two of the leading thinkers were Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. They argued that popular culture can sometimes make people accept existing social inequalities without questioning them. Like if in your house something is missing, then the primary suspect will be your servant. Walter Benjamin explored how art and literature change in the modern age and how they can influence society. Another important thinker, Herbert Marcuse, believed that literature and art can inspire people to think critically and imagine a more free and equal society. So, in short, critical theory sees literature as a powerful tool for questioning power structures and promoting social change. Next, we come to new criticism, one of the most influential literary approaches of the 20th century, which emerged between the 1920s and 1940s. The central idea of new criticism is that a literary text should be studied on its own without relying on the author's biography, historical background, or personal intentions. According to new critics, the meaning of a text lies within the text itself. As a result, they emphasized close reading, carefully analyzing the language, imagery, symbols, metaphors, irony, and structure of a literary work. They believed that every element of a text contributes to its overall meaning and artistic unity. One of the leading figures was John Crowe Ransom, who helped establish new criticism as a formal method of literary analysis. Clint Brooks demonstrated how poems achieve meaning through paradox and irony. R.A. Richards pioneered practical criticism and close textual analysis, while T.S. Eliot influenced the movement through his ideas about literary tradition and objective criticism. So, new criticism argues that literature should be analyzed through a careful reading of a text itself, focusing on its language, form, and internal structure rather than on external factors. Next, let's explore archetypal or archetypal criticism, also known as myth criticism. This approach became influential between the 1930s and 1950s. It is based on the idea that many stories from different cultures share common myths, symbols, and patterns. The central idea of the archetypal criticism is that literature contains universal archetypes, recurring characters, images, and themes that appear across time and place. One of the major thinkers was Carl Jung. He believed that all humans share a collective unconscious filled with common symbols and archetypes. Joseph Campbell expanded this idea by studying myths from around the world and identifying the patterns known as the hero's journey. Northrop Frye argued that literature is built on recurring mystic structures that connect different texts. Maud Botkin also explored how these archetypes affect readers emotionally and psychologically. To sum up, archetypal criticism looks for universal myths, symbols, and recurring patterns that link literary works across cultures and generations. Next, we come to existentialism, a philosophical and literary movement that became influential during the 1940s and 1950s. The central idea of existentialism is that human beings live in a world that often seems uncertain, meaningless, or even absurd. However, instead of giving up, individuals must create their own meaning through their choices, actions, and responsibilities. Existentialist thinkers believe that there is no predetermined purpose to human life. Each person is free to decide who they want to be, but with that freedom comes responsibility. So, with great freedom comes great responsibility. As a result, existential literature often explores themes such as freedom, anxiety, alienation, identity, choice, and the search for meaning. One of the most important figures is Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that existence precedes essence, meaning that people define themselves through their actions. Albert Camus explored the idea of the absurd and how individuals respond to a seemingly indifferent universe. Soren Kierkegaard, often called the father of existentialism, emphasized individual faith and personal choice, while Martin Heidegger examined the nature of human existence and our relationship with the world. In short, existentialism argues that although life may appear uncertain or absurd, human beings have the freedom and responsibility to create meaning for themselves. Another important approach is Neo-Aristotelianism. This theory developed between the 1940s and 1990s and brings back many of the ideas of the ancient philosopher Aristotle to address modern questions about literature, ethics, and human life. The central idea of Neo-Aristotelianism is that literature should be understood through concepts such as virtue, practical wisdom, and human purpose. It focuses on how stories can help us think about living a good and meaningful life. One of the most important thinkers in this tradition is Alasdair MacIntyre, who argued that virtues and moral values are shaped by the communities and traditions we belong to. Ronald Salman Crane emphasized the importance of analyzing literary works as complete structures, paying close attention to plot, character, and purpose. Wayne Booth explored the ethical relationships between authors, texts, and readers, showing how literature can influence our moral understanding. Martha Nussbaum argued that literature helps us develop empathy and practical wisdom by allowing us to experience different human situations and emotions. To sum up, Neo-Aristotelianism revives Aristotle's ideas and views literature as a valuable tool for developing virtue, wisdom, and deeper understanding of human life. We now come to translation theory. Translation theory developed significantly during the 1950s and 1960s as scholars began examining how meaning travels between different languages and cultures. The central idea of translation theory is that translation is not simply as matter of replacing words from one language with words from another. Every translation involves interpretation, cultural adaptation, and choices that can influence meaning. One of the early and influential thinkers was Walter Benjamin. He argued that translation gives a text a new life by allowing it to reach different audiences and cultures. Roman Jakobson explored different types of translation and showed how meanings can be transferred not only between languages but also across different forms of communication. Susan Busnett helped establish translation studies as an academic field and emphasized the cultural dimensions of translations. Lawrence Venuti examined the translator's role and argued that translation often involves important decisions about whether to preserve cultural differences or make a text more familiar to readers. To sum up, translation theory studies how meaning changes as texts move across languages and cultures, highlighting the creative and interpretive nature of translation.